On today's show, the Los Angeles Lakers are pursuing UConn's two-time defending champion Dan Hurley as their next head coach. Why are the Lakers pursuing Dan Hurley? What would he bring to LA as the Lakers' next head coach? And what does this hiring pursuit say about the Lakers' organizational goals moving forward? It's all coming up on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Lakers, Andy Kamenetzky. You can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Lakers. And Andy, we got some vintage Wajbohm news this past week as it was reported that the Lakers are strongly pursuing UConn's two-time defending national champion head coach, Dan Hurley. This coming like completely out of left field, and then things kind of accelerating over the weekend as apparently the Lakers made a compelling case and presented a quote-unquote compelling vision to make Hurley the next franchise head coach. Let's start right here. I mean, why Dan Hurley? Like, of all the names, this kind of came out of nowhere seemingly, and to go for a guy with no NBA coaching experience, why is he a correct fit for this Lakers organization?
Well, first and foremost, I just want to celebrate how both Woj's first bomb about Dan Hurley being on the radar came right before game one of Boston in the NBA Finals. And then the bomb from Woj that Monday is when Dan Hurley is expected to make his decision either way came right before game two of Boston in the Finals, overshadowing the Celtics 2 out of 2 times to begin this finals. So I'm just pleased with the way Woj is delivering this news. Like, I don't know if he's, deep down a Celtics hater or like a big Mavericks lover, secret Laker fan, whatever. But either way, Woj, chef's kiss. As far as what would appeal to the Lakers with Dan Hurley, I mean, you're talking about a guy who's got back-to-back championship experience with UConn. He comes from a coaching family. He is somebody that has a proven track record of building systems, of developing players, of an offense that, I will be the first to admit, full disclosure, I do not follow college basketball at all. But what I'm reading and seeing from the people that do is that his system is both very creative and something that would translate quite well to the NBA. I've seen it described on more than one occasion as like an NBA offense. Like, it feels much closer to what goes on in the NBA than in the college ranks. And as far as the idea of he's never coached in the NBA before, that is true. But bear in mind that before Dan Hurley, that news came out of really left field, and not just for me, by people inside the building, much less those covering the team. There are a lot of people shocked by this. The front runner before then by multiple reports was JJ Redick, who I don't believe has ever coached anybody older than like 11. So and I don't say that to detract from JJ Redick's potential as much as there's nobody out there right now that checks every single obvious box for the Lakers. All that we know is they need to get this thing right because they've been a revolving door at coach since Phil Jackson left in 2011.
So as it stands right now, with what you know about Dan Hurley, having done preliminary research and trying to get a better understanding of how his coaching style would fit with the Lakers, what he would bring to this team, does he feel like he would be the best pick of all the potential candidates so far?
Yeah, I think so. The different, obviously, there's a certain amount of speculation that has to be made in terms of, does his style and his approach to coaching translate at the NBA level, which we're not going to know unless he's hired and then you see it. And, Dan Hurley has a reputation for being exceptionally intense, for yelling, not just at players, but opposing fans, referees, being an 11 on a scale of 1 to 10 for an entire season. And for a variety of reasons, you can't do that at the NBA level. These are grown ass men. It's double and change the amount of season that you have at the NCAA level. Like, you're going to burn everybody out, including yourself. So there will be adjustments Dan Hurley needs to make. But as far as the basketball acumen, as far as the ability to reach players, as far as a track record of success, credentials, all of these different attributes you'd be looking for in a coach. And especially, too, the idea that unlike, JJ Redick, who's never coached, or say, Micah Nori or David Adelman or Sam Cassell, who they've been assistants for a long time, they've never been head coaches, or, I guess James Borrego is the only guy, former coach of Charlotte, who really has any head coaching experience at all. For all of these guys, there's a certain amount of speculation, but I think with Dan Hurley, there are the most amount of answers definitively there for you, as opposed to somebody like Redick, for example, who, as much as you may see that potential, you still have to fill in the gaps based a lot on the things he says to you and vibes. And you know what I mean? And I'm not trying to, again, to detract from Redick, but to some degree, that's true. I mean, you're not basing it on anything tangible. You're just basing it on the things that he said in an interview, the things that he said on a podcast, the things he said on an NBA broadcast, and the way people have seen him in the locker room as a player. But none of that is a direct correlation to coaching. With Hurley, I mean, just think about the reported years and money that the Lakers may be willing to offer Hurley. We're talking, I've heard anything from like 8 to 10 years, close to $100 million. Like, those are serious offers that you don't make unless you think somebody can be transformational.
Yeah, that's big money for a guy that you better be sure is the answer. And that's kind of where I want to go next year, because again, it feels like a bit of maybe an unconventional hire on a number of different fronts, both for a LeBron James led team, for a Lakers team that's in a position where, as long as you've got LeBron and AD, the window every year is championship or bust, basically. So that's a lot of pressure immediately stepping into that position. But for a guy with the pedigree that Dan Hurley has, for what he would bring to the table, he also has a developmental track record, right? Obviously really good with young talent. What does this tell us? What does the pursuit of Dan Hurley kind of tell us about maybe the Lakers and potentially adjusting their organizational goals or expectations for the franchise moving forward? Does this maybe mean that they're not so much focused on that exclusive, win now window like they have been?
Well, I mean, I think they're always going to be, with LeBron and AD on the roster, looking to win a championship if you can. But the thing that struck me most interesting about Woj's original report with Dan Hurley, it wasn't even that they targeted Dan Hurley. It was the details that the Lakers are recognizing that in this new CBA and the way that the NBA has evolved, you can't just rely on scooping up stars and just instantly being in contention at all times, that you actually have to build something. And the Lakers, the idea of championship or bust, that's a great branding ethos. Like the idea that your standard is, or that your standard is a championship. That's a great branding ethos, but it shouldn't actually be taken too literally. Otherwise, I feel like you leave yourself in a position where you're never building anything. You may be skipping steps because you're trying to get yourself as close to a championship every single year, even if in reality you're not actually that close. And, the goal should always be to try to win a championship in the same way I think it is for most teams, unless they know that they're just in a full-on rebuild. Like, you cover the Rockets. I'm sure they're going to enter next season with with the goal of winning a championship. But if you treat anything other than a championship as a failed season, you're going to leave yourself without any room to grow anything, without any ability to have sustainability, because you're just going to be chasing, you're just going to be chasing something that may be outside your grasp unless you actually have the patience to grow it. And to me, like, Dan Hurley is obviously seismic news, but I think what he potentially represents, just the idea that they can't do things the Laker way, or the way that they at least have seemed to define the Laker way, I actually think that's bigger news than Dan Hurley himself.
Well, Dan Hurley is set to make his decision early Monday morning. We should get an announcement as to whether or not he will ultimately accept the position or decline to stay with UConn. Now, if Hurley does turn down the offer to become the Lakers' next head coach, there has been so much smoke. There's been so much smoke about all these other names. Right now, I guess the guy that we've heard the most about is none other than LeBron James's podcast partner, JJ Redick. Who becomes the new frontrunner for the position if Hurley says no?
I'm guessing JJ Redick, who we will now hear leaks, doesn't just remind the front office of Pat Riley, but Phil Jackson, a little bit of Kobe in there, a little bit of Kareem, the vision of Magic. We might end up hearing a little bit about Mikan. Like, there's just a little bit of George Mikan in, like, we're going to be hearing about every single Laker great ever. They're going to see a little bit of him in Redick. I don't know. I mean, kidding aside, I don't know, because the Lakers went through something similar with Frank Vogel. When he was eventually hired, he was at best their third choice. I would argue he was their fourth, behind Ty Lue, who was the first choice, and it looked like he was going to be the coach until he wasn't, Monty Williams, and Jason Kidd, who the Lakers kept requiring whoever they hire put on their staff, because I think he's really who they wanted to hire, but they were concerned with the optics of the off-the-court stuff that's been with Jason Kidd. And look, Frank Vogel ended up winning a championship his first season, so that doesn't mean that whoever they bring in as a very obvious second or lower choice can't succeed. But whoever they bring in now, even if it's JJ Redick, who had been very, very touted through leaks and things like that, he is going to look like a very, very obvious second choice at best. And that's not a great way to get off on the right foot, whether inside the locker room, but also with the fan base.
Will Dan Hurley be the next head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers? How will the Lakers pivot if Hurley says no? You're going to have us covered for all of that and so much more over at Locked On Lakers. Andy, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Anytime.